right now we are looking at pictures. That's in Washington, D.C. For several days in a row now, we've had these huge crowds that are out the front of the White House. It seems to be relatively peaceful chants that are taking place at the moment, but as we know from the last few days, these are how things tend to start, and then tensions do seem to ratchet up a little bit. We'll keep those live shots running at the moment because we have established a connection with Michael. Michael, good morning to you. So how has the threat from Donald Trump yesterday when he wants to put troops on the streets and the order for governors to dominate protesters resonated in the community over there?
Yeah, well, President Trump's threat to force troops onto the street is sinking like a lead balloon with the public. Now, that said, we already have 21,000 troops on streets across 24 states. In fact, if I had a good arm, I could throw a cricket ball right now and hit a Humvee from where I'm sitting. But I note that the Humvee is not weaponized. It doesn't have its machine gun mounted. So the troops are out there. But, and let's remember, unlike in Australia, military police, like you're seeing right there, they're National Guard. In America, the National Guard is a branch of the military, but it's controlled by each state governor. So if you would, Anastasia Palaszczuk controls 10,000 troops.
Got it.
Now, in these states, some governors have brought out some troops, like here in California. However, President Trump is threatening to do something far greater and far more inflammatory. He's threatening to override the power of the governors or the Anastasia Palaszczuks and force troops onto the streets whether they want them or not. It's called federalizing the National Guard. And you can only do it, well, you do that under a piece of law called the Insurrection Act of 1807. The federal government can take over when there's civil disturbance or rebellion. It's only been used a few times. In 1957, in Little Rock, Arkansas, this federalization of the National Guard was used. Why? To force the state to let black kids go to school. In 1967, the National Guard was federalized in Michigan, in Detroit, to fight riots there. And the last time it was used was in 1992, when the National Guard in California was federalized during the Rodney King riots. The big difference is that in those occasions, the troops were used to go to specific places for specific things. This is across the entire country. Now, on the weekend, President Trump had a call with all 50 governors, and he called them weak for allowing these protests to happen. He said, "You look like fools." He called on the governors to dominate the streets and dominate the protesters. Then, at yesterday's White House press briefing, his press spokeswoman said that the president feels enough is enough. He says to the governors, if you fail at your job, I'll step in. I have tools I can use. It's called the National Guard. That would militarize already very emotional situation. Militaries are designed to protect our borders, not to attack our own people. Compare this to a sheriff in Flint, Michigan, who took his helmet off, put his baton down, and said to the crowd, let's turn this from a protest into a parade, and they followed him. Another chief in Norfolk, Virginia, they were coming to his police station. 300 protesters descended on his police station. He went outside, he took a bullhorn and started answering their questions. And so they asked him to lead the march. And there's a glorious photo from somewhere here in the States of two lines of about 24 cops in riot gear, all kneeling on one knee in support of the protesters. So putting troops on the streets, this is not what American soldiers or any soldiers are trained for. Police are trained to deal with civil disobedience. Soldiers are trained to be killers.
But this is, you know, you got to say that it's all very political for Donald Trump at the moment. You know, he pitched himself yesterday as the law and order president. You know, he's taking a leaf out of Richard Nixon's book. He's also done that photo opportunity with the Bible, and of course it quite rightly caused a lot of outrage when you consider that, you know, a lot of people were basically wiped out of the streets and pushed off the streets so that that photo could take place. But that was a direct pitch for his voters, for his support base, isn't it? The evangelical Christians who are on his side, and it's a play for their support again for this year's election. What's your view?
Yeah, well, President Trump is obviously very much playing to his conservative religious base, but I got to tell you, mate, what happened yesterday did not play to his religious conservative base. So let's walk our viewers through this. On Friday night, a bunch of protesters sort of hit the White House gates, and President Trump had to be taken to the secure bunker. And then he put out a tweet later that night saying, "Don't you worry, we have the most vicious dogs and the most ominous weapons, and we're putting the young Secret Service on the front line because they love it. No one's getting in here." Well, again on Sunday, the president had to be taken to the bunker. Now, apparently, the president feels that's an act of weakness. There's been a debate in the White House. Do we condemn the protesters or do we call for calm? And the president's choice was to go to this church that had been burned. Now, it's just across the road from the White House. I want you to watch these photos, these images. There's a bunch of peaceful protesters in Lafayette Park. Now, the president has to go through them to get to this church. So the police line up in their riot gear, and without warning, these police then charge the peaceful protesters. Watch this. All of this, oh, we didn't see it then. All of this, as the police charge in, is just so the president can cross the street and have a photo opportunity in front of a church holding a Bible that, when asked, "Is that your Bible?" he said it's a Bible. Now listen to this. This is the bishop of that church. The president never even told the church he was coming. Listen to what she had to say.
This was a charade that in some ways was meant to bolster a message that does nothing to calm the soul and to reassure the nation that we can recover from this moment, which is what we need from a president.
And then today, the president doubles down and goes and visits a Catholic shrine to St. John Paul II. The Catholic Archbishop of Washington called that reprehensible and baffling. The last time the president went to church was apparently sometime last year. So that tells you about his real motives for wanting to go and stand in front of these sacred places.